so much for joining me.
Sure
It's
thing.
funny because I've been writing about raw feeding since 2014, and I share just everything that I'm learning as I'm learning it with my followers. And I have a dog that he was diagnosed with cancer last year, February 2021, with
Oh my
lymphoma,
goodness.
and he is still with us and doing really good. And when he came out of remission in December, and I was talking about it, and at the same time talking about National Raw Feeding Week, one of my followers was like, "If you haven't already, reach out to Nora and learn about, you know,
Hmm.
rotational mono feeding."
Nice.
And
Wow.
your name was familiar, and that concept was familiar, but it's just really something that I've never looked into in all of these years. And so I was just like, this is so perfect because finally there's something new for me that I can learn about and share with others. So tell us, um, who are you and how did you find yourself in this space? What drew you to
Oh, geez. That's a long story. It goes back to the
animals?
mid 80s when I started changing my own diet and learning about human health and the relationship that human health has to what we put in our mouths, and started a long journey there. And then, probably maybe, I don't know, 10 years after I started changing my own diet, it started occurring to me that I needed to change my animals' food too. And I started learning about what's in pet food, decided I didn't want any part of that anymore. That was probably 23, 24 years ago, something like that. And at that time, it was hard to get information. And I went to some seminars and just listened to some experts, and just started crafting my own way of doing things. And it was only when my dog developed severe ear canal issues, the ear infection issues, that I really started looking in earnest at refining his diet. And once I started doing that and introducing the practice of fasting, once I started doing all that, then he really rejuvenated. And so then I started writing about it. I had started writing about what I was learning all along, but then I started selling the book maybe 10, 12 years ago, something like that. And I just have had so much success with um, transitioning dogs in my own experience, and people get back to me with their testimonials, and they go out in the dog owning world and tell people about it. And there's just so much success when you figure out what's causing problems. That's what's missing from a lot of approaches. So
Yeah, yeah. And I read that you fasted your dog for 7 days, and that your dog just basically became a puppy again.
mhm.
And so during that 7 days, was it like zero food at all?
No food, just water. And
Just
I
water.
actually did 11 days with him early
Okay.
on. He was 11 years old, and I fasted him for 11 days, and he completely rejuvenated. He became a puppy again. And I've had my own experience with fasting, because I fasted myself for 18 days on water, and I went away to a clinic to do it, a supervised water fast, and experienced the same thing with my health. But that was after I had done it with my dog. I had wanted to. It's a big investment to go off and leave your job and your home for a month and a half and go to another place and do a fast, and that's how long it takes, including the refeeding. So I had done it with my own dog, wanting to do it myself, for years and years, and finally got the opportunity. But he became so puppy like. I mean, I was just trying to clear up his ears, right? I just wanted his ears to be clean. And he just turned into a puppy, and he ended up living to 19. And
Oh
for the
wow.
last, so many 11s come up in the story, but for the last 11 years of his life, he didn't visit a vet once. One, not one case of sickness in that whole time. And that's my idea of success. That's what I
Yeah.
want to impart to other people. No vet visits, no sickness, no symptoms at all.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. So, I was reading, or I was watching a video of yours about allergies, and it really hit home with me because I have a dog that has food sensitivities and he has environmental allergies. And how I found myself with raw feeding was just basically trying to help him overcome that. And switching over to raw is what did it for him. I mean, he still has issues here and there, but it really is, instead of reaching for medication, I now adjust the diet.
Yeah.
And it helps him. So what can you share with me your thoughts on dog allergies and why, I think in the video you called it like the allergy con.
Mm-hmm. Yes, because it's so ingrained in our culture now and in our thinking, like much of medical philosophy or medical theory is ingrained in our thinking. Allergy is just something that was introduced. It was a theory that was introduced like 115 years ago, and it never made sense from the beginning, but people embraced it. And most of all, the medical industry embraced it because it gives them the power. They can do testing on you, they can do testing on your dog, they can give you drugs to suppress the symptoms, they can tell you to stay away from the triggers and whatnot, but they will never tell you what's causing all of that stuff to come through the skin. And you know, my feeding methods are based on natural hygiene, and natural hygiene is all about the inner terrain, keeping the inner terrain clean. And we get told so much about how it's our outer terrain that's important, like wash your hands, wash your this, wash your that. Well, what about our inner terrain? The inner terrain is what determines whether there's going to be disease or not. And if it's polluted, that stuff has to go somewhere. If you eat so much junk, or your dog eats so much junk, that the primary organs of elimination can't keep up, then the stuff comes through the ears, it comes through the skin, it develops in tumors, it gets stored in fat cells, it makes dogs fat, it wreaks havoc with the functioning of vital organs. So that's the problem that we need to look at. And nobody out there in the medical world, even in the holistic medical world, is telling us how to do that, how to clean up the causes. I can't tell you how many people have come back to me and said, my dog was diagnosed with allergies, and I kept this chart on my refrigerator that I would refer to because he was allergic to basically everything. Well, he's still exposed to those things. He still eats those things that he was supposedly sensitive to or allergic to, and they don't bother him now because his inner terrain is not polluted. So a lot of those things, those food sensitivity issues, it's hard to talk about it in one general umbrella term because some so-called food sensitivities have to do with foods that don't belong in dogs in the first place. And others have to do with, like everybody says that chicken is a common allergen, but so many people have said to me that when I started decreasing the fat in my dog's diet, when I started doing rotational monofeeding, when I was feeding him, when I was giving him meat days, I would include chicken, and it no longer bothers him. I mean, almost everybody tells me that.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, because chicken gets a lot of bashing, and I think it's because everybody feeds it. It's a go-to, right? It's cheap, it's accessible, and it's very fatty. I mean, go buy a chicken at the grocery store and turn it over and look at the globs of fat and see if you can find a wild bird that looks like that. You won't find a wild bird that looks like that.
Yeah. I feed my dogs goose, and it's astounding how lean it is. I mean,
Really,
it
even
looks like,
goose, and goose is probably fattier than a lot of, because it's waterfowl, right? It's probably fattier than a lot of other meats.
yeah. So it's like it's wild goose, and it is. I was shocked when I got it. It was just like, wow. I mean, of course, it was trimmed up for me, but you would expect like maybe even a little marbling, like you would see with venison or something. But nope, it's super lean.
I'd be interested in finding out what your source is on that. So.
I have a friend of mine.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
And when they get too much, they call me up.
Oh, nice friend.
So with monorotational feeding, or actually before we go there, what does it mean to clean the inside? So like, what exactly are we looking at?
To answer that question, you have to look to the source of the waste, and that is anything that can't be used by the body. So what we have to look to is nature, and I'm always saying that nature is our only objective teacher, because what do wild dogs eat? They eat the bodies of wild prey, and when they can't get wild prey, they go off and raid the apple orchards, or they go to the blueberry field or whatever and eat their fill of fruit. Well, that means anything that we can't find wild dogs eating is going to create waste in the body. And so many dog owners are still combining incompatible foods together in the same meal. And the problem with that is there's only one chemical. Digestion is mostly chemical, and there's only one chemical environment that can be created in the gut at a time. And if you're feeding protein, then the chemical environment is going to be acidic. It has to be in order to break down proteins. Well, if you're feeding plant foods at the same time, plant foods require an alkaline environment to be broken down. So anybody that knows anything about chemistry knows that acid and alkaline, they neutralize each other. And that means more of the food is going to become waste, and less is going to be usable. So if you do that day after day after day, and hardly anybody doesn't do that, even bar feeders do that, home feeders do that, but particularly with commercial food, because then you got cooked meats in there in the mix too, and they're going to be hard enough to break down. But when you have that miscombining happening on a daily basis, you have a situation where the primary organs of elimination aren't able to eliminate all the waste by the time another meal is coming in. So you have a backlog, and the backlog builds. And so the body, it can't stay in the colon. It has to be stored elsewhere. So like you have closets for stuff in your house. That's what tumors are for the body. It's like, what am I going to do with its stuff? Well, I'll put it out of here. I'll put it here. It'll be out of the way. Nobody will see it. Won't bother us. It won't, get in the way of vital functioning and whatnot. So that's what happens. The backlog builds, and that's the cause of disease. End of story right there. That's it. The cause of disease. Putting too much stuff in the body that can't be cleanly digested. So
interesting.
So
basically, with monorotational feeding, then that leads into, that's why we will be feeding a meal of protein.
Yeah.
And we want, and then a separate meal of, carbs, because I usually feed vegetables for the fiber in them, but I would separate that out and put it over here, and then a separate meal for fat.
Yes, absolutely. We have meat days and we have plant days, and it's rotational mono feeding. It's RMF for short. It just kind of evolved. It started like 10 years ago when I developed a protocol for somebody, and I said, okay, this person is not going to be open to feeding raw meat every day. I'm going to have to, put something together that gives them some options. So I offered these different protocols, right? And that got me thinking, everybody wants that, right? Everybody wants to think that they're picking the option that's best for their dog. So we've sort of refined it now so that, when you're brand new and your dog is already dealing with some disease conditions, and especially like cancer, but then when a dog has been highly medicated, we look at these various factors, and what we know is that fasting causes dogs to cleanse or detox really fast. And since plant foods are so easy for dogs to break down and they go through the body so fast, some plant foods are already broken down for dogs, like fruit. Fruit is already broken down. There's not much that needs to be done there. So that means the body is going to have more energy to devote to cleaning up the backlog, cleaning up the waste, healing the disease. So sometimes we want that process to happen quickly, and other times we want to slow it down. And the times we want to slow it down is when a dog has been on prednisone for 5 years, has been on, what's the new one? Apoquel for a couple of years, Cytopoint, the flea meds, the regular administration of the Trifexis, and their Bravecto, all of those. When a dog has had the full treatment of all that stuff, then they probably want to start with a high meat rotation, because that will slow down the cleansing. And humans discovered this for us a long time ago, when we decided to, start eating according to our biological, adaptations. And we found out that if we started that really fast, we would get flu-like symptoms, we'd feel weak. So all you have to do to combat that problem is to keep some of your old foods that you used to eat in your diet. And that allows your body to be working more on digestion instead of having all of this energy and time freed up to cleanse and heal. So because cleansing and healing is not fun, it's sort of your comeuppance because you messed up, right? Yeah. Unfortunately, dogs have to pay the comeuppance when we mess up.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so what are the symptoms that we would normally see? Because I like when people talk about when you switch to raw, like you'll see, increased tear stains and goobers, and maybe some stuff coming out of the ears, mucousy stool or loose stool, maybe even sometimes increased shedding. I've seen dogs have even a greasy coat just for a short period of time as they're going through that. Is it something similar to the cleansing that you're talking about?
Yes, all of those things can be associated with detox or cleansing or healing or whatever you want to call it. And it can be worse when these dogs have had lots of drugs, because the residues of the drugs are very acidic and they will start coming through the skin. And when they do that, they really, they can cause a lot of discomfort to the dog. They can cause scabbing and inflammation, and it generally can get worse before it gets better. I imagine there are lots of RMFers out there, rotational monofeeders, previous ex-RMFers out there telling everybody that the diet ruined their dog's health. Just like it happens in the human world, that people will start eating a really good diet and they'll get the flu or whatever, and then they'll go, that diet is crazy. I almost died on that diet. And the same thing will happen with dogs. I mean, it will look worse before it looks better, and it's just stuff coming out, and it has to come out. But most of the time, those are rare exceptions. We still see that very rarely, even though the incidence of this administration of these drugs is growing. We still see that rarely. In most cases, people just go, my dog was allergic before, no problems now whatsoever. My dog had IBD, no problems whatsoever. And IBD is something that clears up fairly quickly. Any kind of chronic digestive disease is obviously caused by food. So removing the cause will allow the body to clean it up.
Nice. Very nice. And so how does someone even go about switching their dog to rotational monofeeding?
Good question. It's so easy. And a lot of people want to do it gradually. It doesn't need to be done gradually. You don't have to lift a burden gradually. The most gradual thing that I recommend is keeping a lot of meat days in the diet, and that gives the body more work to do, and frees up less energy for healing and cleansing. But for most people, I recommend, especially if they're coming from kibble feeding, you don't want raw meat meeting up with kibble in the gut. I don't know, in my early days of raw feeding, I made that mistake of feeding raw meat and kibble together. Maybe everybody does that in their journey. I don't know, but I had a real mess, and I hear, I hear from people that, and I read on forums and groups and whatnot, that people do that. They introduce it and they get away with it. I didn't. I had a huge mess on my hands, and I had a very sick dog for like 24 hours. And so you definitely don't want to do it gradually. I recommend that people just fast their dogs for a day, And that usually allows the digestive tract to clear out. And then, because all of these problems are created, these transitional problems that have to do with the first day of feeding, are all about what's already in the gut. If there's something sitting there, raw meat is going to come in and sit on top of it, and raw meat putrefies. And even though dogs are set up to eat putrefied meat better than we are, it's still going to produce a big mess that the body is just going to opt to get rid of in most cases, which means it's going to come out as vomit or as diarrhea. You definitely don't want to do that. So that's the cause of all the problems. So if you can just get the digestive tract clear for a whole day, then you can feed, anything within RMF the next day, and it's fine. Now, sometimes people coming in will have a problem even with one day of fasting. And the alternative that I offer to people for that is feeding plant food that I have offered to dogs many, many times, and have very rarely seen even a kibble addicted dog turn down, and that is cooked yams and cooked quinoa. You just mix those 50-50, or you don't have to add quinoa at all. You can just do, cooked yams. And the next day you see orange poops, and that tells you that the digestive tract is clear. And that means you can start the next day, because plant foods, like I said, will go through the gut pretty fast.
Yeah, that's really a good tip. Thank you. So when it comes, I know you have a book, and I will definitely put a link for it so people can check the book out. But one thing that yes, I mean,
that's my printed copy.
The people that I spoke to were just like, when one person left the comment and a ton of people came behind him and were like, yes, I can't believe you don't know about this. And I'm just like, I can't believe I don't know about this. So I'm like crazy excited about it, because
I'm a bad marketer. I'm not a marketer. Okay. You're hired.
Because I'm like really excited to give this a try. I have 4 dogs in the house. And so to me, that's 4 opportunities to see what this can do for my dogs. I have a geriatric dog. He's going to be 12 years old in March. And he's the one with the allergies and things like that. His first vet said that he wouldn't live past his 3rd birthday.
What?
Because of all of his health issues. And that's what pushed me into raw feeding and getting a new vet. But I have my 8-year-old who has, lymphoma. His sister, she's fine, but still, she's 8 years old. And then I have our youngest, who is 3 years old. And so it'll just be really cool to see how each of them responds and reacts to a switch in this diet. So right now, I'm feeding my dogs a raw food diet that I formulate. It is muscle meat. I mean, just like what we're all taught, the BARF model, muscle meat, organ meat, bone, with some vegetables, and other, like, oysters or things like that. I do canned oysters, things thrown in to meet their nutritional needs. And with RMF, what is suggested is basically I take that meal, and instead of feeding it all together in a dish, one day will be muscle meat, one day will be, or I guess muscles and organs, one day would be the vegetables, and and then I can have fat days. So like kefir, or I just learned how to make yogurt, so I'm like super excited about making yogurt. But when it comes to feeding this way, do you suggest that people maybe take a step back from supplementation? Because that's the biggest thing. It's like my biggest pet peeve when it comes to raw feeding is I see people come to raw feeding, and first they want to know how to start raw feeding. And then the second question is, what are all the supplements that I need?
Right.
Where it's just like, you don't know if you need supplements yet. Why are you asking?
Because they perceive that it's deficient. And that's like failure. You're just assuming that it's going to be a failure to begin with. I am just not into this supplementing thing at all. There is so much money to be made out in the marketplace for selling supplements. It seems like anybody who's telling you how great supplements are either got their information from this system that's teaching people that that natural foods are deficient, or somebody that's already selling that stuff. And there's more marketing in it than truth. There is a book called Whole, Whole, by T. Colin Campbell, and he talks about this idea of using fake food fragments to supplement the diet. And he cites all of these studies that are sitting on shelves collecting dust because they don't make anybody money, but they prove unequivocally that people who take supplements don't do as well as people who don't take supplements. Yeah. And they actually run studies, and they'll have, say 100 people, 1,000 people, or whatever, with the same disease condition. They give 50% of them the supplements. They don't give 50, the control group any supplements, and the control group does better than the supplemented group. And we don't have those studies on dogs because nobody's doing them. Right?
Yeah.
Nobody's doing them. Right. There's no money.
You got to find someone who's willing to pay for it.
Right.
If it's not going to ultimately lead to them making more money, they're not going to pay for it.
Exactly.
And that is not surprising to me. I have anemia. And for years, I was taking iron supplements. And I mean, it was one of those where I wasn't consistent in taking them because it never seemed like they were working. And a friend told me about a company called Ancestral Supplements, where their supplements are actually just the meat, like grass-fed beef and the different organs in grass-fed beef. And so I started taking the spleen and saw a difference immediately. And I don't even have to take as much as the bottle recommends. It's part of my diet. And it's just like, someone told me years ago the difference between like taking a vitamin C pill versus eating an orange. It's like when we're taking that pill, we lose out on all of the other things in the orange that make that vitamin C so effective.
Right.
And that has really stayed with me when it comes to choosing things for my dog. It's like, if I am going to choose a supplement, I want it to basically be a concentrated version of the food, where they took a lot of the food, air dried it or freeze dried it, broke it down to a powder, and here you go, rather than just one nutrient that they've isolated and it's now synthetic, and that's what I'm doing.
Right. The problem with that is that even when they do that, it's missing the context of the food, because there are things that you can't just take the water out of food. When you take the water out of food, other things go with it too. And since we've only identified, I've heard this, 10% of all the nutrients in food. We don't know what we're missing.
Oh, wow.
We don't know what we're losing out on when we're dehydrating food or when we're fractionating it in any way. So I think the best way is to do no supplementation at all. I have never supplemented a dog's food in my life, and so many people have been liberated from this idea that they have to spend so much money on these. It's a hugely expensive industry, right? There's a reason why they're so expensive, and it's because you have to pay for that whole food, and then you have to get it down into this, packageable form, and that takes a lot of it, right? It takes a lot of the whole food, and it takes a lot of labor and machinery to get it down into that form. So it's very expensive. I'd much rather have people using their money for real food and just going to the store or finding the best possible source of food. And it is out there. You do have to do a little bit of footwork to find it, but not necessarily. If you have a small dog, like I have a 12-pound dog, I have one 12-pound dog to feed. I can go to the Asian store, buy a 6-pack of quail, and that's her food for 2 weeks, and along with the other, the plant foods that I buy for her. That's the empowerment that I want to give to people. But if you have multiple dogs, like you have big dogs, you have 4 dogs, it really behooves you to go out looking into the, raw feeding world and see what's out there, acquisition-wise, supply-wise. But as far as supplements go, I just don't recommend. I recommend giving all of them up and just feeding cleanly digestible foods. I don't think that supplements are made use of by a dog's body because of that missing context.
Yeah.
There's more risk in that than there is in the deficiency risk.
Hmm.
Deficiency is what we always think about because when you can add something into the diet, that gives some marketer out there an opportunity to sell you something.
Yeah.
And that's why we're always being told, add something, add this, add that. No, what you mostly want to do is take stuff away. You want to
Yeah.
remove the cause, you want to remove the waste.
Yeah, a friend of mine often says that when she notices that someone is constantly talking about adding stuff, but not really being specific, but just talking about it, deficiency, she was like, within a year or so, they're going to come out with a product. And
Right,
everyone's going to be primed to buy it because they've been telling them about adding and adding it. And I was just sort of like, oh my gosh,
right.
that's kind of that's an interesting thought. And it's one of those things where with the pet industry, I feel like I think there are so many people who are in this industry for because they love animals and for a good reason.
Yes,
But you also have to make money.
right.
And it's not a place where there are many people that are stopping you or standing in your way of producing products. And I notice as a blogger, I get contacted by companies all the time to promote their things. And the number of websites that are strictly focused on supplements for dogs or pets is astounding.
I
I
know it.
mean,
I know.
I get emails from them all the time, and the people that I'm talking to can't tell you anything about. I mean, now I just don't even bother responding to the emails,
Hmm.
or if I do, I just say no, thank you. But they don't really know anything about the products that they're doing, like the sourcing or how it was processed, and
Right.
you know, who is it? Who? What are your reviews? I mean, I had one person where I told her, because she was like, I was hoping you can do a review. We'll send you the stuff, and I told her I was like, it takes 3 to 6 months for me to do a review on a supplement. And I was like, because I need to see how it's going to do with my dog over the long haul. And she was like, oh no, you'll see improvement right away. And I was like, well, no, that's the honeymoon period.
Hmm.
When you add something new, a lot of times the dog will rebound and stuff. But
Hmm.
will they stay that way a
Hmm.
month later, six
Hmm.
months later? And it's like, if they're
Hmm.
not, I want my followers to know that, in my experience,
Hmm.
this wasn't the thing,
Hmm.
because I have had that happen in the past, and they didn't. They were just sort of like, oh, okay, well then never mind. And that was my answer right there. It's like, you guys don't even have faith in your product to allow
No.
me to give it a proper review.
Yeah, there's so much money, and to me, this involves a major personal sacrifice for me because I make no money. I have only information to sell. Only
Mm-hmm.
information. I don't sell any products. I wish that there were some supplements out there that I could say, hey, buy this. This is great for your
Mm-hmm.
dog. I could retire. I'm not retired. I have to work. So
I hear
yeah,
you.
it's, you can tell when somebody's following the truth when they have to make personal sacrifices for it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a major personal sacrifice to not have anything to sell. Let me tell you,
Yeah.
perpetual
Well,
poverty.
Nora, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me about this. I'm like super excited. You sent me some great links that I'm diving into. I'm going to check out your book. And I mean, this is probably going to be my obsession for at least the next 6 months because I love just the idea of doing something different and seeing, what will happen with my dogs, especially since they have been raw fed for so long. I
Yeah,
think that it's a mistake to think that just because I switched to raw feeding, I'm done.
right,
There's still so much to learn about them, and I've learned so much from you today because right now our community is so focused on balance, and I
right,
know that the feeding this way will scare a lot of people because
right,
it's like, what about balance?
right,
But it's like one thing that I've always struggled with the idea of balance is, and I got this from a friend, which is a balance according to whom. It's like, who
right,
is telling me what guidelines am I following? Because there are several guidelines out there. And going back to what you said earlier about how we actually only know 10% of the nutrient breakdown of food, then that just blows everything out of the
yeah,
water because we're balancing and we don't have the complete story yet. So
right,
are we really doing that?
yeah,
And so I'd rather focus on something that works and that is working for other dogs then focus on these arbitrary goals
Right.
that no one can support.
Especially when this whole idea of balance came from industry in the first place, because they wanted to be able to put those words on their bags of
Complete and
dog
balanced.
food, complete and balanced, complete. And when you listen to canine nutritionists, classically trained, they will use those words left and right because it's their bailiwick, right? Well, look at the wolf, watch what the wolf is eating. How do you extrapolate that and call it balanced? How can you say that a bag of dog food is balanced? I just think we have to throw that term out completely and start fresh.
I love
You know,
this. I'm so happy.
I can't wait to see what happens with your older dog, because people are asking me all the time if it's too late to start their dog on, RMF or change their diet or whatever. Oh, it's too much stress. It's too this. It's too that. No, it's not stressful to lift the burden. It is not stressful to lift the burden of a dog. And if something in the diet is creating a burden such that disease is present in the body, then you're doing your dog a favor to lift the burden. So, and they show you too. I've had so many people tell me, my dog hasn't gone to the toy box and grabbed a toy for years. And they're suddenly going to grab their toys and they're playing with their younger siblings. And, I hear these stories every day. So I can't wait
I hope that you'll be hearing my story soon.
Me too. I would love that.
Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate this.
Sure thing, anytime, Kimberly. And feel free to reach out if you need guidance along the way too. I know you've got a lot of experience, so this is new, so feel free to reach out.
Yeah. This is good. I am so excited. This is going to be a great path.
Super. Well, thank you so much for this opportunity. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All righty.
Recording stopped. Okay, so we were stopped.
Super.
Thank you so much. This is perfect. So what my plan is I'm breaking up my videos into smaller piecemeals because thanks to TikTok, no one has attention spans anymore.